So what is a sub 3 marathon? The sub 3 marathon, or the time of 2:59:59, is one of the most elusive time, benchmarks you as being pretty decent at the distance at roughly 4:15, 4:16 per kilometer. That translates to 6:50 to 6:51 minutes per mile. Can your body sustain that to break sub 3? So in this video I will tell you all about how I did that and how you can do that as well. So if you haven't actually seen my actual marathon recap video, so this was a whole sort of encapsulating my whole running journey up until now, do check out in the upper right hand corner that marathon journey. But without further ado, let's get into the meat of the video. So first things first, let's just point out that before I actually broke sub 3 in 2018 at the Berlin Marathon, I had a huge aerobic base. One of the things that worked in my advantage was my training base, be very much aerobic orientated, and the ability to sort of add volume into my training. That is something that I've always sort of been strong at. So if you think about it, I've been running since 2007, 2008. I've been doing marathons for a very long time. So I've always had the ability to sort of have that aerobic engine. Obviously what I was missing was speed over the distance. In terms of breaking sub 3, when I did do it for the first time, it was my third attempt. Previous attempt was the previous year. I ran a 3:16, which was my PB going into it. Prior to my third attempt was at the London Marathon, where it was a heat wave where I was just not in the right frame of mind. I just didn't believe, and I also hadn't got the training under my belt. So what did I do in terms of that training? I built a big aerobic engine, so that in terms of volume, I was doing roughly, started off over a 4-week period in the June, doing 46 miles per week average, and then 4 weeks on that average was 52 miles, and then on that it was 66 miles, and we sort of had a peak week just under 70-ish or so miles. During that period of time, I don't recall having many bad runs. Yes, there were a few. It's natural to have that as part of training. I was enjoying the running so much because it was basically taking me to a level which I'd never been before. So that was the key thing in terms of volume where we went to. So we had a nice gradual build up. Having failed twice, I believe my motivation and my hunger for doing it was stoked. It was probably at the highest it could have been at in terms of doing, and I think that is one of the biggest elements into actually breaking a particular goal, or whether you're seeking a particular breakthrough, whether it's 20 minutes in a park run, 40 minutes in a 10k, a sub 90 half marathon, or a sub 3 marathon, which is one of those distances which is a pinnacle for a lot of runners. It achieves a Boston Qualifier, and again, in terms of my makeup and what I was actually going for, it wasn't only just a sub 3, it was to get that Boston Qualifier. And I was, as I've said many times, I was obsessed with Boston. My motivation and my hunger and my desire to push myself fueled every aspect of that training, getting me up before work to do a 6-mile recovery run and then track in the evening. I wasn't going to do that just because I just wanted to do that for the sake of it. I wanted to do that because I believed I wanted to take my body and my belief to that place. So I think number one, aside from the training, is to break 3 hours in the marathon, and how important that is to you, because that, on the days when it's not going so well, will make you get out of that door. That finds your why, find your hunger, find the reason that it gets you out of bed when it's pissing down with rain in the middle of winter, or when it's 30 degrees in the middle of summer. Wherever you may be, wherever you're watching this video, and whenever race that you have coming up, first thing is to, what does it mean to you to break 3? Rather than just saying, yeah, I'm just want to break 3 for the sake of it, you need to have a little bit more substance about that. Definitely that's something that I feel quite strongly about and I wanted to go there and line up in Hopkinton knowing that I was worthy with the people and my peers who are around me, and I could start that watch and start that race knowing that I was meant to be there and deserved to be there. So I think that was something that was hugely driving me as a fire burning inside me. So yeah, number one is to find your why. So I had a lot of easy running. I ran a lot to heart rate. I ran a lot to knowing what my easy running was. So in terms of, for me, anything under 140 beats per minute, around 142, 143-ish, anything under that was nice at zone 2 running. And I did actually run a lot to heart rate during this period of time. I'd not done so before. I'd actually been in the lab. I actually got myself measured. One of the best ways to know what your heart rate zones are. But for me, running to feel was essential. Once I know what my heart rate zones were, I was able to push within those paces and keep those easy runs easy and sort of keep those hard runs really hard. I was introduced sort of into my structure double days. I was running 5 times a week. with a strength and conditioning session along with a yoga session as well. Easy running was easy and done to heart rate, and obviously that was all timed fairly well with the recovery running. In terms of one of my weaknesses, I felt as if the speed work and obviously the element of carrying my body over the distance, one of the things which I came out of the first block, first attempt and the second attempt, which I just felt as if I just didn't have the speed in my legs. So what we did was to introduce benchmarking quite early on in the cycle. I felt as if mentally I needed to have broken first and foremost 20 minutes in the park run and also 40 minutes in the 10k. Bearing in mind a marathon consists of running 8 5Ks back to back in 21:15, I just felt as if I needed to be faster at the 5K first and foremost, and eventually naturally I would have improved at the 10K, at the half, and then going into the marathon I would just have more top end speed. Personally, to run 21:15 back to back 8 times, I needed to be within the sub 18s for a park run. We're looking at sort of 17:30ish or above, just under sub 18. If my 5K distance is my all-out max effort, if you then add on 18, 19, 20, you've got 3 or so more minutes on top where you're not working as hard, and that gives you the sharpness and that speed. So if I was a car, I would be very much a sort of long cruiser. I just need to add a little bit more horsepower into the system. So doing that was one of the ways that we sort of benchmarked using park run. Every 2 or 3 weeks was to go to my local park run and sort of see where we were in the fitness, get an immediate sort of indicator on where the fitness was, how I was performing over a 5K. Mentally, I think for me, mentally was a big thing in terms of seeing like a 1950 clocked on the watch for the first time, or 1850 or 1830, knowing that what I'm doing week in, week out, day in, day out is actually working. I think mentally that unlocks a lot of things in your mind into your ability to train. On top of that was to do a little bit more track work, tempo work and more interval work. So I was doing my tempo work on a Tuesday, and we're talking like tempo blocks of maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, all done at sort of like a zone 4 at your threshold level with a few minutes repeat. And then we're sort of repeating that over maybe 1 block, 2 blocks or 3 blocks, depending on where we was in the cycle. So having those sessions on a Tuesday sort of tied me nicely into sort of like a medium long run on a Wednesday, where I'm running easy pace, sort of keeping it quite steady, just trying to recover off the session that we done on the Tuesday. And on the Thursday I then would tend to go into like a recovery run on the morning just to flush out the legs, and then I'd go to track and maybe do work on sort of like pyramid sessions. We've got like 400 sessions, 800, 1k repeats, 1 mile repeats. A lot of the time it was sort of 1k, 1 mile repeats, which just gives you the ability to sort of work anaerobically, work at that sort of VO2 max level and that anaerobic zone where you can actually add a lot more top end speed. That was mainly 2 sessions a week on a Tuesday and a Thursday. Depending on what week we were doing, I would then do a park run on a Saturday. On the Sunday would have a long run, obviously building nicely up to like 21, 22 miles. What we would do on that long run was to include marathon pace work in that specific long run. So I'm talking 2 times 4 mile blocks. So you might run for 5 miles and then do a block of 4 miles at your marathon pace, have a couple miles recovery, and then you do 4 miles again up until you sort of get to 22 miles or wherever the distance was. That is essential in terms of working on your ability to hold marathon pace, your ability to work on tired legs if you've run maybe hard the day before, and it's also confidence wise the ability and physically to actually cover the ground and the distance that you're actually going to go to on that specific day. What I did with my marathon pace was to work at like 6:35, 6:40, so I wasn't working at the 6:50 pace, just to make it feel like when you are actually dialing it down to the 6:50 pace that you need for the day, it should feel a little bit more comfortable. I remember running the race in Berlin and remember feeling like, oh, this feels quite comfortable, I feel quite relaxed, I'm sort of in the zone, I'm able to maintain this and just work through the motions as you sort of get yourself into the race. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've sort of taken from running sub 3, not only once but 5, 6 times in a row now, that if you're going to work on that marathon pace, it just needs to be a lot faster than the pace that you're actually going to run on the day. And I think there's no secret into doing that. It means that you can sort of cruise and feel more cruisier at that pace when you actually go and race and lace up on that particular day. We would alternate between whichever week it would be. So maybe week A might be a marathon pace block work on the Sunday, then week B might be just time on your feet, steady / easy miles, up hills potentially, and then probably the week after then you would then alternate maybe with maybe 5 miles at marathon pace, 10k at marathon pace, maybe 8 miles at marathon pace. So just variating between where we was in training and as to sort of what was on the structure of the calendar and how I was essentially feeling. So in terms of certain runs that work for me, that sort of helped me to break through, was progression runs. Great at engine building. In terms of a midweek long run, they were sort of still tuned more to recovery side, but it was just a longer period of time for me to be on my feet. We're talking like 10, 11, 12, 13 miles, and it was an ability for me to sort of recover after the hard day on a Tuesday, and then get myself ready for the Thursday as well. So that was a big thing that I added in there. Also, what I added was doing strides. Strides are super important in terms of becoming a little bit more efficient and more economical in terms of covering the ground. I highly recommend that you do maybe 4 to 6 strides after an easy run. They're as simple as doing 20 to 30 sprints. Just imagine you're being chased by a dog, and like, it's a great way for you to open up your stride and work on that turnover, that cadence and that stride length, which is essential for fast and powerful running. Another thing we added was actual racing, but there was a few races that I used. Here in London we have a company called Run Through who run races across the capital and across the country, and then I was signing myself up for 10k runs, half marathon runs, just to sort of see where we was in progress. And again, I talk about confidence. To be confident in terms of your training is an extra string in your bow. It really does help you more than you believe. It makes you believe in yourself, it makes you trust in your training, it makes you validate everything that you are doing for that very one moment where you want everything to click. It's underrated in terms of how you feel, how you cover the ground. Because we all know that feeling of running really well when it feels so effortless. It just feels like you're floating along the ground and you're just covering the legs. You just don't even feel like you're running, and it feels so enjoyable. That is what I mean when things are working so well, your training is going well, you're basically getting the value out of your training. So I think all those things and all those aspects tied together helped me in terms of breaking 3, and it enabled me to have milestones along those ways rather than it being one big block of 4 months. Each month I was getting something out of each month, and getting to get something out of each month which you can take away, something tangible, something that shows you where you are in, are probably the biggest thing that obviously you need to be able to lace up on that particular day. Let's talk about the actual day in terms of pacing and how I actually paced that particular day. So my goal of when I went to Berlin was to run predominantly with sub-3 paces. I just felt as if they would get me over the bulk of the race, knowing that they were controlling all of the things that personally I just didn't want to have to do or think about on that day. So I think I took a lot of the guesswork out of pacing and left it to the paces. Yes, I know in this moment in time we don't actually have races on, but in terms of pacing, maybe a time trial marathon or even a virtual marathon, I'd highly recommend maybe have someone with you on a bike if you can do so, or if you know your body well enough to actually have the race broken up and break the race up in that way, so you know where you are at certain moments. And if you see this time being well under, you know that you're on your way to breaking 3, or if you see it slightly over, you know moments in time where you can actually pick up in terms of distance. So yeah, my goal was on that particular day to stay with the sub-3 paces, stay with him as long as I felt it was possible, and then when time was right to pull the trigger and sort of just leave them and have the confidence enough to go and push on and sort of make a sort of break for home. I did that personally at 30k, 10k, sort of run it with your heart and sort of try and get yourself to the goal. And you don't have much time to talk to people in a marathon. I definitely don't. And sticking with the same bunch of people for the majority of the race, and you sort of build this sort of camaraderie together that although you're working independently, you're also working together to try and get each other over the line. So if one person wants to push back, not saying that you're going to go and drag them back, but you know that if that person's finding it tough, like it's time to dig in, you just sort of switch your focus and sort of you just start to think, okay, I need to stay in this moment, stay in this mile, stay in this 2k, 3k, 4k, or whatever it is, and just sort of really hone in on making sure you're putting one foot in front of the other, making sure that you're feeling comfortable, you're feeling light, you're fueled, you're taking hydration on board, you've taken your gels. It's hard to sort of reclaw that sort of fuel and that energy back, but I went ahead of them and I was determined, so determined to stay in front of them, because if I stayed in front of them, I was going to break 3, and it eventually worked out that way. And obviously, having laced up on that morning, stood in the pen and wrote a couple of sort of goodwill messages to myself to remind myself how good I could be. I believed in that very moment that the 4 months prior, I was meant to be here, I was meant to break sub-3, I was meant to do this breakthrough. And this is something that you can translate to sub-5, sub-4, sub-3, even beyond that. If you truly trust your training with your heart, you know you've done the work, because no one else is going to do that work for you. You cannot have a substitute take your place on that day and be like, hey, Amrit, I'm going to go run you a sub-3 because you did 60% of the work and I'll do the rest. It don't work like that. Not at all. what you put into running is what you get out, and that is something that I've learned over the sport, and that is something that everyone needs to know, that there is no shortcuts to doing this. And the thing is, when I look back at my sub-3 journey and my running journey in particular, I wouldn't change anything, because I wouldn't want shortcuts, because how I did it was how I did it. It was always going to be that particular way, and I've learned so much across the time that gives me the ability to talk to you guys here on the other side of the camera, and it allows me to tell this story and how you can sort of do things that I've picked up now in terms of my journey and sort of help you along your journey. So I think that's the biggest takeaway that I've had. Enable me to share it with you, and it enables me to sort of connect with you on a level. It enables me to make these videos, and it allows me to speak to you directly in terms of how I can make you a better runner from something that I've done and something that I know that can work for the everyday runner. Because at the end of the day, I'm just your everyday runner that loves running. Moving on to my watch, I wore 2 watches for that day, obviously because I probably thought that one would fail and I wouldn't have it to sort of upload to Garmin or Strava. If you do want to follow me on Strava, I'll put the my handle down below. But so in terms of my watch, what I had on my watch was, which is something that I still run to now, is my sort of screens. Is I have the second field on Garmin, so I have the timer at the top, and then I've got the distance, I've got my lap time, which is basically every kilometer or every mile, however your units are set up, and then I've got the average pace. I highly recommend having lap pace turned on, because it gives you a rolling lap on every one that you've passed. So whether you lap it manually, whether you lap it automatically for the distance that you've done by the GPS, that's something that you can switch on and off, and it also gives you a little indicator rather than the average pace of the whole distance that you've done. It gives you a small segment of that particular mile or kilometer. So nutrition for me was probably something that underpinned this whole journey. The start of me training in 2018, I cleaned up my diet. I wouldn't say my diet prior to me sort of going on the sub-3 training block was bad. I was just probably eating not enough fruit and veg, greens, not enough food that was going to help me recover, a lot more processed food, and I was probably having one too many sugary and sweet treats. I kept the base of my diet and I just basically refined it. I refined things. For my breakfast, I was eating something like porridge with fruit in it. For lunch, I was having more greens. I was eating spinach, I was having kale, I was having broccoli, good sources of protein like rice. Just cleaning up and learning a little bit more about how body tolerates food. What I really did get over that period of time was I really enjoyed my food. It's a small change, it was small changes which sort of equaled into sort of big goals. On the top of nutrition, on the particular day, I took 6 gels during the race. This was the first time that I'd really sort of honed my gel intake, and it was something that I'd practiced a month prior at a half marathon. I used that as just a good simulator, as a good idea on how my body felt and what was tolerable. So what I tend to do was sort of mix up my gels. So I normally have a normal isotonic gel at around 6 kilometers and then mix it up with a caffeine gel at another 6 kilometers. So every 6k I was taking a gel, so 6, 12, 18. Biggest recommendation that I have with taking gels is to start taking fuel early. If you delay your body the requirement of fuel and nutrition during a race, it's too late. You cannot undo the damage that's going to be already caused by not taking on fuel. And what I would also add was that I took one gel 20 minutes before the start of the race, because I would have gone through a warm-up. It would have been maybe 3 hours or so since I last eaten. You're burning off a lot of nervous energy waiting in the pen, so just to get the body used to fueling, just to get something on board, is to take maybe a gel 15 to 20 minutes before you start. I ran sub-3 in a pair of Nike Vaporfly 4%. This is the first generation of this shoe. That was another motivator for me, was having that on the back of the shoe, because I remember saying that once I broke 3, I was going to etch in the time of 2:59.17 that I did in Berlin that day, and I haven't actually done so. So maybe this is a reminder. For another marathon, I'll probably choose the Vaporfly Next Percent. Eventually, I think I will try the Alphafly over a marathon. Another thing to add in terms of how I broke up the training was I was doing it outside of running. So every morning when I get out of bed, I do like a routine of like a mobility routine. It's just loosening up the back, getting a little bit of blood flow into the body, just a bit of light stretching, nothing too strenuous because you've just woken up. When I first attempted to break 3 was my body broke down in training like 6 weeks before the actual race and caused a problem with like a nerve issue in my glute, and it was just an overload of my body and I just couldn't tolerate it. So I needed to become a lot more stronger, and I got myself into the gym, making your glutes really strong and bulletproofing them against injury, firing up your hamstrings, getting those quads firing, and basically building on that chain of your body. And there's a video that I've done up above in terms of what I do in the gym on a sort of weekly basis, which I'll link to. They work hand in hand, they facilitate each other. It's something that's so important that you need to include in your training, and to do, you can make improvements in the gym as a runner, 100%. A lot of the stuff you can actually do at home with a resistance band and some small weights. Yeah, along with the strength and conditioning, and I was doing some routines at home in terms of some band work, just sort of keeping the glutes fairly strong. I was also doing yoga once a week, most often or not on a Sunday evening after a long run. Any kinks and have a good stretch. I wouldn't do any sort of dynamic flow yoga. I was tend to doing more sort of nurturing yoga, allowing the body to sort of just relax, holding poses for a little bit longer. What I didn't want, and what I still believe to this day, is the things that supplement your running shouldn't stress you out, shouldn't add more load into your training week. Not at all. They shouldn't make you feel beat up. They shouldn't actually deter you or provide you at a disadvantage to actually going out the next day and lacing up and feeling good for it. It should actually work in your favor, give you a little bit more explosion and power on each and every step. So there we have it, guys. That's pretty much sort of an in-depth sort of section by section view of how I ran sub 3. If you do have any comments, please sort of reach out down below, or if not, just drop me a message down on Instagram and I'll get back to you. I do get back to every single one of you once the video is posted, so do let me know if there's anything else you have on this particular video, and obviously going forward as well, what you'd love to see me do. I wouldn't change anything because it's done. I've done it, and I did it the way that I was meant to do it. So I'm a big believer in everything happening for a reason. The things that I learned along the way, and again allowing me to connect with you here on YouTube, able to take out the philosophy, the structure, the mentality elements of this particular training block, and I've been able to translate that into every other training block. Once you break sub 3, in my mind, you got to keep doing it again and again. I mean, it doesn't get any easier when you do try to do it. So the bare minimum of when you do lace up, if things do go wrong, like for me when they went wrong in Boston, there are some fundamentals which you can take from this video that you can translate into your training. And do let me know how you get on, and if you are sort of training for a race coming up, if you're trying to break 3, yeah, just drop me a message and I'll get back to you. But yeah, there's definitely takeaways that you can use in terms of adding those sort of threshold work sessions, those block sessions, running like 5 by 6 minutes off like a 90-second recovery. There's loads of different sessions, but the key thing is to work those different energy systems that you need for a marathon, and how that sort of plays into an overall all-round picture for the marathon distance. Really hope you enjoyed this video, really hope you stayed with it for this long, and obviously stuck, and you take something away from this video in terms of your particular training and whatever breakthrough that you are doing. So give the video a thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe down below and hit that bell notification so you know when I've posted a new video. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for helping me grow this channel. We are on the road to hitting 1,000 subscribers, so my first big milestone here on YouTube, so that wouldn't be possible without your help. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.